The Prussian general Clausewitz has said, "The greatest enemy of a good plan is a dream of a perfect plan." In search of the perfect portfolio with perfect investments, we often overcomplicate our investing and personal finance strategy. Ever heard of Ray Dalio's all-weather portfolio, the coffee house portfolio, or Dave Ramsey's 4-fund portfolio? If you search the web, there are literally endless lists of portfolio ideas that all espouse why one is better than the other. However, one thing they all have in common is that they're more complicated than the simplest portfolio I'm going to cover in this video. So if you'd like to learn more, let's get started. Hi, if you're new to the channel, my name is Tay from Financial Tortoise, where we learn to grow our wealth slow and steady. Simplicity is one of the most overlooked and underrated vocabulary in the American dictionary. We subconsciously doubt when an answer to a complex problem seems so simple. And this is especially so true when it comes to investing. The financial media has done a great job of making it seem like investing should be complex and difficult. It's created an illusion that if we're to do more work, more research, and do more digging, we'll find the secret elixir of a perfect investment portfolio that will make us millions. However, the brutal truth is this: the more complex an investment is, the less likely it is to be profitable. And to pop the bubble even more, there is no such a thing as a perfect plan. Only a plan that works and works for you. This is where I want to introduce to you the simplest investment portfolio in the world: 2 simple index funds and a checking account. Let's dig more into the specific tools. Number 1 tool is an equities fund. And my personal favorite here is the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, also known as VTSAX. Stocks will act as your core wealth building tool, the engine that will propel your money forward towards the magic of compounding. Number 2 tool is a bond fund. And my personal favorite here is the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund, also known as VBTLX. Bonds will help smooth out the rough rides of stocks, sort of like the brakes that you can tap here and there so you don't run yourself off the road. Now, a caveat here is that if you're in your 20s or even your 30s, you don't really need to think about bonds at this stage. This comes more into play later as you get closer to retirement age. Number 3 tool is cash. Cash in my books is one of the most underrated tools because people judge it based on its asset class. Cash doesn't make you much money. It just sits there paying the bills. Thus, people dismiss its power and tend to downplay its importance. However, if you watch any of my other videos, you know I love cash. Not only because it pays the bills, but because it provides so many other benefits like the ability to handle emergencies, to buy opportunities, and my favorite, emotional peace. That's it, guys, the simplest wealth building portfolio in the world. 2 index funds and a checking account. If you just want the takeaway, you can turn off my video here. But if you'd like to hear my rationale behind this portfolio structure, please watch on. Let's first discuss why I believe investing in an equities index fund like the VTSAX to grow your wealth is one of the best ways to invest. Number 1 reason is that when you're investing in broad market equities fund, you're investing in real publicly traded companies. And the more broad your index, the more companies in your portfolio. When you buy stocks, you're doing more than purchasing a little piece of paper. You own a piece of that company and you're investing in its future success. The businesses and the people behind these companies work tirelessly to serve their customers and to maximize their profit. They're constantly competing against each other, and only the strongest and the best companies survive. And because of this cutthroat business environment, stocks have become one of the most powerful and successful investments throughout history. And you don't need to look far to see the proof of this power. Just take a look at the S&P 500 the past 100 years, the 500 largest companies in the United States. The trend is up because American companies are working hard to create value for their customers. But you might be asking, why is investing in an index fund the best way to tap into this amazing growth? Shouldn't I just purchase the great companies on my own, buy shares of Apple, Netflix, and Amazon? My answer is no. This is where the second major benefit of investing in index funds comes in, the mechanism of self-cleansing. Yes, American companies as a group are great. They create new products and values. However, to know which specific companies will do well or not do well is almost impossible. Blockbuster was one of the most profitable and popular video stores throughout the 90s and early 2000s. At its peak in 2004, it boasted 9,000 stores globally and it earned $5.9 billion in revenue. However, within a few years, it started to lose its popularity, and in 2010, the rental company filed for bankruptcy. What is ironic is that in 2000, Blockbuster was even offered the option to buy Netflix for a bargain price of $15 million. Foolishly, they passed on the deal because of their own pride. As we all know, Netflix went on to become the company that it is today, a $100 billion giant that is synonymous with single-handedly bringing streaming media to the public mass. But if any one of us went back to the year 2000, could any of us have honestly been able to guess how and where Blockbusters and Netflix would have ended up today? I think not. And this is where the mechanism of self-cleansing of index funds is so important. We want to reap the benefits of a company like Netflix. However, none of us have the magic ball to know what company will one day be the next Netflix. Not a problem, because an index fund like the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund automatically recycles fading away companies with new ones. The market is not stagnant. It is fluid, and the index fund's self-cleansing mechanism incorporates that fluidness into the fund. When a company like Blockbusters loses value and goes bankrupt, it automatically gets cleansed from the index. But new companies like Netflix are taking their place, and the upper limit to its growth is limitless. In the last 20 years, Netflix has a total return of almost 23,000%. Because the lowest a bankrupt company can go is 0, and there is no upper limit to growth, the net result of a broad market index fund like VTSAX is an upward bias, to the right and up. If we were to model all 4,000 companies in VTSAX, we'd find that as some previous big stars like Lehman Brothers faded away, but new companies like Tesla grew, prospered, and took its place. But please note that this only works with broad-based index funds, not actively managed funds. Once fund managers get into the mix, trying to beat the index, this mechanism of self-cleansing goes out the window. Most often, these busy fund managers makes things worse by trying to pick winning stocks, which not many can do effectively. And the worst of all is that they charge more to do so. Stick with index funds and gain all the benefits of investing in the market while paying less. Now, let's discuss why you might also want some bonds in your portfolio, especially as you get closer to retirement age, and why a broad bond index fund like the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund, aka VBTLX, is all you need. Bonds' purpose in your portfolio, as I mentioned earlier, is to really help smooth out any bumpy rides in the stock market. But it also provides a deflation hedge. Deflation occurs when the price of goods spiral downward, and inflation occurs when they soar. Unlike stocks where you're buying a part ownership in a company, when you buy bonds, you're loaning money to a company or government agency. Since deflation occurs when the price of stuff falls, when the money you lent is paid back, it has more purchasing power. This increase in value helps to offset the loss deflation will bring to your other assets. In times of inflation, prices rise and the money owed to you loses value. When you get paid back, your cash buys less stuff. It's better to own assets like stocks that rise in value with inflation. Now, the risk mitigation concept here is great, but there are also a lot of risks you have to mitigate with holding bonds. For example, default risk. What happens when you loan money to someone, but they decide to default and not pay you back? Or how about interest rate? When the interest rate rises, like it is doing right now, bond prices fall. A way to mitigate all these risks while still getting the benefit of holding bonds is to hold broad-based bond indexes like the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund, aka VBTLX. It holds over 10,000 varying bonds such as the US Treasury and mortgage-backed securities of all maturities, short, intermediate, and long-term issues. With this one single bond fund, you get a broad exposure to the US investment-grade bond market. Greater the broad exposure to a diverse set of bonds, lesser the risk. Alright, let's talk briefly about why I'm also talking about cash in this video. And personally, I believe you should hold more than you feel comfortable. The reason is I believe cash provides additional benefits than just covering routine expenses and to meet emergencies. They provide you a cushion for you to think about life in a more broader term. If you have enough cash in your bank account to fund your life for a year, you'll be amazed at the brain space you have to pontificate about the future and strategically make the next move. But when you don't have enough cash, you don't have cushion in your life. And when you don't have enough cushion, you can make irrational decisions. Do you know what the recommended protocol for trying to help someone that is drowning is? It is not to jump in the water to help him or her. What is recommended is that we should try to reach that person with something rigid like a pole, not our arm. Or throw them a rope and try to encourage them to grab onto it. And the reason for this recommendation is that drowning individuals are probably the most dangerous persons to try to rescue. In a panic, drowning individuals are likely to claw at rescuers and climb to the surface at all costs. And like a drowning person, when we're in a financially vulnerable and desperate position, we can't think straight. Thus, the perpetual downward spiral of bad decisions that can put us in a worse and worse financial situation. However, when you have enough cash in your bank account to weather through a year of unemployment or market downturn, you have the time. Time to think, time to plot your next move, and the time to make your best financial decision. Don't see cash sitting in your bank account as just losing value. See it as more than that. Your bodyguard, your fitness trainer, and your thought partner. That is why I consider cash as your third leg to your two-fund investment strategy. Alright, with that said, let me share some sample portfolio allocation with the 2 index fund by life stage. The first sample portfolio allocation is for the wealth accumulation phase. For many of us, this phase of life is when we're in our 20s and 30s. We still have a long career ahead of us, and withdrawing from a portfolio is still many years away. During this stage, the recommendation is to be 100% in stocks, 100% in VTSAX. Yes, 100% in stocks is considered a very aggressive investment allocation. However, when you're young, you should be. You have decades ahead to invest, and market ups and downs should just be noise to you. You should be excited for market dips during this phase because there are great buying opportunities to scoop up more shares of VTSAX at a lower price. That said, if you're still very nervous with a 100% stock allocation, no judgment here. Add a bit of VBTLX to smooth out your ride. In the long run, it shouldn't make too much of a difference as long as you keep it to a moderate level. The second sample portfolio allocation is for the transition phase. For many of us, this phase of life is when we're in our 40s and 50s. Retirement is not right around the corner, but you can see it coming. During this phase, I would recommend sprinkling a bit of VBTLX to get used to holding bonds in your portfolio. Maybe start with 5% the first few years, then up it to 10%. You want to start transitioning from a 100% stock-heavy portfolio at this stage, so you can get ready for the wealth preservation phase of your life. The third sample portfolio allocation is for the wealth preservation phase. For many of us, this phase of life is when we're in our 50s and 60s plus. We've built our wealth, so now we want to preserve it to fund our lifestyle going forward. This is where you can ramp up the bond holding to 25%. So you're 25% VBTLX and 75% VTSAX. If you're even more wary of volatility, maybe even 30% VBTLX and 70% VTSAX. Or even 40% to 60%. Though for me, this might be too conservative. But who knows, right? When I get to this stage in my life, I might have a very different perspective on risk. All right, now that we covered some sample portfolios with these two funds, let me talk about some commonly asked questions with the super simple investment strategy. One is, what if I want to find alternative to VTSAX and VBTLX because you can't buy Vanguard? Or you want to stay with other investment firms like Fidelity or Schwab because you've been doing business with them for a while. What are my options? VTSAX is the best option for total stock market index investing in Vanguard, but there may be fees associated with buying Vanguard mutual funds such as VTSAX at other brokers such as Fidelity or Schwab. So let me share with you some excellent alternatives to VTSAX at these investment firms. If you're invested with Fidelity, you actually have two options. The Fidelity Total Stock Market Index Fund, FSKAX, and Fidelity Zero Total Stock Market Index Fund, FZROX. FSKAX has been around much longer and has very similar returns to VTSAX. It also has a slightly lower expense ratio than VTSAX at 0.015% and tracks the Dow Jones US Total Market Index. FZROX is a new kid on the block and made big news when they offered the first mutual fund with a 0.0% expense ratio. A few caveats to note regarding FZROX is that it follows the Fidelity's in-house proprietary Total Market Index, and it's only available to Fidelity customers. It also has some limitations with portability, meaning transfer to other investment firms. But if you're a lifelong Fidelity customer, this shouldn't be a problem. If you're invested with Charles Schwab, Schwab Total Stock Market Index Fund, also known as SWTSAX, is your best option. It has a low expense ratio of 0.03% that is very competitive to Vanguard's VTSAX and is most appropriate for Schwab investors looking for a total stock market index option for their retirement accounts. As regards to alternatives to VBTLX, I have two recommendations. The first bond recommendation is the Fidelity US Bond Index Fund, also known as FX and AX. It tracks the Bloomberg Barclays US Aggregate Bond Index, which is composed of investment-grade government bonds, corporate bonds, and mortgage-backed securities. It holds approximately 8,400 bonds. The top issuers are the US Treasury or issuers of mortgage-backed securities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It has an expense ratio of 0.025%, which means if you have $10,000 invested in Fidelity's US Bond Index Fund, you're essentially paying $2.50 for Fidelity to manage this fund for you. The second bond recommendation is the Schwab US Aggregate Bond Index Fund, also known as SWAGX. It tracks the Bloomberg US Aggregate Bond Index, a broad-based flagship benchmark that measures the investment-grade, US dollar-denominated, fixed-rate taxable bond market. The index includes treasuries, government-related, and corporate securities and mortgage-backed securities. Schwab US Aggregate Bond Index Fund holds approximately 8,000 bonds. The top issuers are the US Treasury or issuers of mortgage-backed securities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It has an expense ratio of 0.04%, which means if you have $10,000 invested in Schwab US Aggregate Bond Index Fund, you're essentially paying $4 for Schwab to manage this fund for you. Another common question I get is, what about international exposure? When you turn on the news, there's a lot of talk of international companies like Samsung Electronics, Taiwanese Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or Tencent Holdings. By holding only VTSAX and VBTLX, aren't you missing out on all the gains from the international market? Actually not. When you're buying a fund like VTSAX, which includes all US publicly traded companies, you're tapping into the international market. Indirectly, but you're still connected. Today, many of the major US-based companies generate a good percentage of sales and profits overseas. Just look at Apple, the biggest US company based on market cap. However, as of second quarter of fiscal year 2021, 67% of Apple's total revenue was generated from outside the US. At one point, there were more Chinese people purchasing Apple products than there were Americans. Another note, where do you think all the parts that Apple uses for their products come from? They come from the rest of the world. Display from Japan, RAM from Korea, battery from China. When we invest in VTSAX, we're investing in Apple, and thus in essence investing in all the companies that supply Apple. The world is a lot more integrated today than ever. With that said, if you still like some additional exposure directly to international companies, I recommend Vanguard Total International Stock Index, the VTIAX, as your fund of choice. It has an expense ratio of 0.11% and represents close to 8,000 non-US international companies. That's it, guys, the world's simplest portfolio. 2 index mutual funds and a checking account. If you'd like to learn more from someone much more qualified to talk about this concept, please check out Gerald Collins' The Simple Path to Wealth. It was this book that really inspired me to simplify my investing approach, and I haven't looked back. Thank you guys for watching. If you'd like to learn more about another popular portfolio strategy, the 3-fund strategy, please check out my video here. Until next time, all the best.